Hi, Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and here's another interview in my series of interviews with subscribers. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. It's Stephen here from the Idiot Quilter with another exciting interview with someone who's across the big pond. This is Rianne, and she is from Kick-Ass Quilts. Love the name, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes as well. And you are in Holland, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, where
Yes.
in general in Holland are you?
Uh, near northeast, the east.
Okay. The reason I asked that is because I have been to Holland a couple of times, and my husband's family come from a place called Zwolle.
Okay.
So I kind of know.
Yeah.
I don't know Holland, kind of a thing, but I have a general idea of where you're from. So that's great, and that's as way of explanation for those of you who are watching this and are in North America. Why there's an accent. It's a Dutch accent. But your English is really, really good. So not a problem. Okay, let's jump right in though. How long have you been quilting?
Uh, yeah. I used to say about 10 years, but at some point that's not correct anymore, of course. I've been quilting since I've been 18, so 12 years, about
Okay.
12 years.
So you're not an amateur. You've been in this a long
Yeah.
time, really. So
Yeah.
that's good to know. So how did you get started? What was the
Uh,
that got you going?
Quite a traditional story, actually. I got started through my mother.
Right?
But first, I was always creative. I dabbled in drawing and embroidery and stuff like that because I really wanted to express myself. But I think when I started quilting, that really sticked. That was really something that stayed with me.
Right.
So my mom taught me how to do a log cabin, and then we made a Harry Potter quilt together, and then it was off.
Did you have any other influences in your family? Like, did you have any grandparents that were into this kind of thing? No, so it started
No,
with your mom,
yeah,
and she was a quilter then.
yeah, she still is. Yeah,
Oh,
and we
okay.
quilt together sometimes as well.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. So many of the interviews I have done, people seem to they got into it not because of their mother. They got into it maybe because of a grandmother. It seems to skip a generation, I find.
Oh,
In my family, my mother never quilted, never really sewed either, or anything like that. My grandmother did. And
oh,
so that's, it kind of skipped a generation. And I started very late in life. I've only been quilting for about 5 years. So I was like you, I was a creative. I always
mhm.
been creative. I always tried all kinds of things over the years. And I think a lot of quilters are like that. Is there some other type of craft you do as well as quilting, or are you solely a quilter?
Well, I do a lot of things that are touch to quilting. Like I also do storytelling and I create my own patterns and stuff like that. But I think it all goes to quilting. Like for example, even when I tell a story about loneliness, I will use a quilt to tell that story.
Okay, that's very
So
interesting.
it's your mode of expression, I guess. Like my grandmother used to be a painter and that was her way. And people have their own thing. And for me it's really quilting but in a broader sense. Also, I make like soft toys and stuff like that. It's not
Well,
only blankets.
okay, and I do want to see some of your creations as well in a moment to share with them. But I want to come back to this storytelling. I know
Hmm.
there are novels out there that are written with a quilting theme. Have you ever written something like that, or do you have any plans to do something like that? Write a novel with a quilting theme?
Um, no, I think it's more that I use quilting to tell about general stories like surviving trauma or finding connection or having joy in your life. So quilting is for me a medium to express those things and also to connect non-quilters to quilting.
Hmm.
Because to me it's more than just working with fabrics. It's more like a way of living and yeah, being.
Yeah, it's a if I'm reading you right here, it's really a form of communication. And you say
Yeah.
a way of using quilting to connect to people who may not be quilters through the story
Yeah.
that the quilts generate. I think that's very important in quilting. I think a lot of people forget that quilting does tell a story, because the person who created the quilt is putting a lot of themselves into the quilt.
Hmm.
You know, the way we choose the pattern, the way we choose the colors, all are very personal things, and they come from, you know, our stories about
Yeah.
ourselves as well.
Yeah,
So
and I'm also I'm trying to get new people into quilting by using that ability to tell a story without needing to be on a big stage. Because there are lots of people who are introverted or are maybe scared to express certain things. And so I teach them quilting as a way of showing who they are without having to let anybody know if that doesn't feel safe for them. So I'm using it as a tool.
yeah, I think that is really an interesting perspective on quilting. And I know that a lot of people got into quilting during COVID because
Hmm.
we were home, we were
Yeah.
lonely. And, you know, it's a way of, you know, sharing something with the world out there, not feeling quite so lonely. And you mentioned that it's a form of therapy as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's very true. Another thing I thought of as you were saying about the storytelling in that and sharing it, getting more people involved. You are relatively young.
Hmm.
Like, I'm old enough to be your father. Actually, I'm probably old enough to be your grandfather, and that scares the bejesus out of me. But you know, quilting is associated with older people,
Yeah.
ladies especially. And my mission here in life with my quilting is to show them that men can do this too. But it would
Hmm.
be nice to get some younger people involved in this as well, because, you know, it's an art that could die with the older
Yeah.
generation. We got to bring in new people. So how do you inspire, how do I word this? How do you recruit individuals into quilting, if that's a term for it?
Well, my method has been, and this is based on like years of thinking about it, because I've been doing kick and quilts for I think 3 years now. My method is not making it only about quilting, which sounds very strange, but I try to recruit people focusing on what quilting could bring them. So I'm not telling like teenagers, do you want to quilt? I tell them, do you want to learn how to express yourself, work with fabrics? Do you want joy? Do you feel creative? Do you want to make something with your own hands? And then the outcome and the method is quilting. But if you only focus on teaching people the perfect quilting with the difficult patterns and stuff like that, people tend to get scared and they never come back.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I like that approach. I think that's very refreshing, because I think a lot of people think of quilting as, oh, you're making a blanket. You know,
Yeah,
it is so much more than that. It's an art. It's an art
yeah.
form, and it's a form of, as we've already said, a form of personal expression.
And it's about personal expression, but it's also about community. And I think community is also what people are looking for, but not necessarily they sometimes people a lot of quilters feel like they don't really belong in those normal communities because they're too loud or there's no room to be different. But
Right.
quilting is also about creating communities where you can be together. So that's also why I teach people things like making party flags or making community quilts together. So again, it's not only about doing the technical things, it's more about what quilting does to people.
Yeah, I really agree with you with all of those things as well. It just opens up the whole idea of quilting to those that don't really aren't as involved into it, and even those of
Hmm.
us that are involved into it, because the community aspect is very, very important. You know, that's why we have retreats.
Yeah,
Zoom has been wonderful over COVID. If anything came out of COVID that's positive, it's the whole use of Zoom and how we've been able to interconnect, just like what we're doing right now. I mean, quilting has brought us together, and we are thousands and thousands of miles
hmm,
away from each other. So, you know, it's really creating a
yeah.
global community. And I think,
I even taught people in Uganda to quilt, and I've never even been there. So
yeah, I mean, it's wonderful. You know, it
yeah,
makes the world a little smaller place. And I think we need that in the
yeah.
world right now. So let's talk a little bit about how you would characterize yourself, your style of quilting. Would you
Uh-huh.
consider yourself traditional or modern or free form or experimental or eclectic?
Well, I used to say I'm in a modern quilt group. We actually this weekend, 5 years. So I used to say I'm a modern quilter because I'm young,
Right.
but that doesn't always work out well. I call myself also the sustainable quilter because I want to inspire people to use their old clothes and to not buy fabrics because old clothes have so many stories to tell.
Yeah.
I think it's also lively. Everything I make screams joy in life.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. So,
fun, joyful, but it's not traditional.
yeah. Well, it's also an unfair question because I'm asking you to label yourself. And as soon as
Yeah.
we label ourselves, we don't fit into the label. You know, we're all different because this is a very creative art. But what I want to focus on right now is the whole your whole philosophy of sustainability, because I've been watching your YouTube channel, which we're going to talk about in a few moments. But the whole, what is it? What do you mean by sustainable?
Hmm. Um, Sustainable quilting to me, I think, is focusing on the meaning of the fabrics you use and the meaning and intention you have with the quilt. So you're not just making for the sake of it. That can be part of it, of course, but you're not just collecting lots of stuff and then it being there in the cupboard and then when somebody dies it gets thrown out. It's really about getting the most out of the joy of quilting and the quilts you make. Like, and I have created 8 assignments to inspire people to think more sustainably. And part of that is connection because quilting brings people together. It's joy. It should be fun. It's mindfulness because it brings peace and quiet in your life. And it's also environmentalism because I really don't like people buying fabrics for the sake of it. Like, I'm not against buying fabrics, but you should be conscious about how you treat the resources of the earth because there's enough already, and otherwise there's no future for people.
Very true. And so I would imagine that you are a great proponent of going out and uh, upcycling or recycling, like say old clothing,
Mm-hmm.
fine fabric, going to your charity shops, your places like that, and finding fabric and using it. I have
Yeah.
to admit, I am very guilty of what you were talking about, which is I love fabric. I collect fabric. I have more fabric than I'll ever use in my
Mm-hmm.
lifetime. And you're right. The sad part of that is I'm the only person in my family who quilts. And I know when I'm gone, that fabric is probably going to end up somewhere where it shouldn't end up. And I
Mm-hmm.
also think your philosophy reflects the difference between my generation and your generation. Your generation seems to be so much more conscious of the environment and the issues we have with the environment and our effect on the environment. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
my generation, we just took it all for granted. Like, and I think that's, thank God, your generation is doing that because when you get
Yeah.
to be my age, hopefully there's still a world here that's in better condition than what my generation and the generations before me have done to it as well. But I
Yeah.
also like this philosophy of sustainability. I have not actually gone to, there's a charity shop very close to me. I have never really gone in there and looked around and thought, I could get some of this and I could make something from it. But I think I'm going to have to change my direction and my thinking more towards that because, and I'm going to say it for a very selfish reason. I'm getting a little bored with the usual. I want to do something that's got a little bit of a story behind it. It's helping the environment and it's a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a challenge because, I think using used fabrics to create something new is a bit of a creative challenge. So,
Yeah.
I need to keep my brain going. So I love that. So what
Much
else?
more fun.
Yeah. So what else about the sustainability? I know you were mentioning that you have courses. So
Yeah. And now also sustainability to me is not only about planet. It's important part, of course, but it's also about your own health and the health of your community. Because I see a lot of young people and older people are not doing well with mental health. I don't know how it is where you are, but people are not doing well. And I think create coming back to the meaning of the things you actually use can help, because if you really love my mom made a quilt for me 10 years ago, and I don't need any more quilts because I love that one, and that creates some kind of security in your life.
Right.
So, and that's also part of the teaching. I teach people how to quilt with old clothes and with random fabrics. So you can design and color theory and stuff like that and embrace what it is. And I also teach the philosophy so people can find a way back to what actually means something to them. And in that way, also peace of mind and more joy.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really great
Yeah.
idea. And you're talking about the mental health issue. And yes, here in North America, just like anywhere else in the world, we're having a mental health crisis. A
Hmm.
lot of this came to the surface because of COVID as
Yeah.
well. And from my point of view, one reason why I like quilting is because it challenges my brain every day. And I'm in my 60s, and I'm retired, and I've been retired for 11 years. I did a very creative job. I was a high school teacher, an English teacher.
Oh.
I love my job. I've always been a creative, but what I find with quilting is it keeps the brain going. And I've seen
Hmm.
too many people my age that when they retire, they just basically rot and die because they've got nothing to challenge their brain. And I think quilting is definitely something that helps with that. And I think it helps with mental health as well. So, yeah, so it's very interesting your point of view about sustainability. Most people think of it as just an environmental thing, but sustainability in terms of mental health and well-being, I think that is a very good philosophy too. So if I want to take one of your courses, are
Yeah.
these online? Do you do them in person? Are they something where you can, come and go as you please because they're pre-recorded? How does that work?
They will be online. I'm a little bit in a transition period website wise. I think it's going to be a Patreon where you can uh, like subscribe to it, and then you get access to all the classes I have, and I will add new ones like every month or 2 months or something like that. And they are pre-recorded, so you can just get them whenever you want. I also sometimes host Zoom sessions,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes live in the Netherlands.
Oh, okay. So if somebody doesn't speak Dutch, it like,
Most of it is English. Like the live sessions in the Netherlands, it depends a bit on the audience, but all the online stuff is English
oh, okay. Well,
because
that's
I want to be international.
Yep. And I'll be definitely looking forward to that. And I know you've got some other plans for your business model as well, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But before I get to that, let's get back to you as a quilter. Do you have any favorite creations? Do you have anything you can show us right now?
Um, yeah, what I've been doing, the Quilterschilder in the Netherlands is 40. So end of August, we're having a big exhibition, and I'm going to be part of it because
Okay.
I make quilting hip again.
Yeah.
So I've been working on those things, and that's things I really love because it's going to be 10 quilts, and they're all about the potential role of quilting in a sustainable future. So not only about how we can help the planet, but also how we can build communities and mental health. And I've been really enjoying it because it expands your creativity because you really have to deliver something good.
Yeah.
And I love it.
That's
If
great.
it's a success, it's probably going to be classes at some point. One of those things is I make soft toys.
Cool.
I cannot actually see myself. That's not well. You have to see if
Well,
it's okay.
yep. It's right in the picture. No problem.
And I also make small things
Okay. Well, those are cute. Those are fun.
because if you want to introduce people to quilting, you shouldn't start with like a whole blanket because then
Sure.
they will run away.
Yeah.
Not a soft toy.
Oh, that's just, they look like you've designed them so that if somebody has it, they can cuddle up with it. you know?
I'm actually holding one during the
Yeah, I
interview to
see
keep
that.
myself calm because I tend to be a bit hyperactive
Oh,
through work email.
maybe I should get one of those because I tend to be that way too.
And
That's
the
really
interesting thing is, I fill them with scraps, and that makes them very heavy. But that's actually a good thing because heavy things calm you down when you cuddle with them.
like a weighted blanket. Those are
Yeah.
all the thing right now for that kind of thing. Well, that's
And I
interesting.
really like quilting as like an activist tool for sustainability because they are so soft. Because I think we cannot change the world by being angry. We have to be calm and soft. So quilts are the perfect metaphor for that.
True, true. I love your philosophy. That
Yeah.
that's really nice. Now, um,
Another, yeah, I
what's
don't know if
this?
that's visible. This is like a whole quilt, so that's probably difficult to see.
But we'll get an idea from it. Yeah, we've got that's all in the shot right now. So
Yeah,
that looks like it's been designed with scraps.
yeah, yeah.
Great. I love scrap quilting.
I make my patterns and classes in such a way that you can use whatever you have because I want quilting to be accessible. And I didn't have money when I started. That's why I started with the secondhand fabric. And I don't want people to be like, I don't have money to buy quilting fabric, so I cannot quilt. So I tell them, you can use old clothes. I will teach you how to use it.
Yeah, great. And it's all still part of that recycling sustainability
Yeah.
attitude too. Now, I was going to ask you, in the Netherlands, is there much of a trend towards quilting? Is it very popular, or is it something that people are still struggling with or aren't that interested?
Well, it's like quite big in a way because the Quilt Guild has I think 10,000 members and there are
Oh,
lots of
wow.
people not associated.
Right,
But it's when you don't quilt, you don't know about it.
right. Yeah.
It's actually quite tough for me to start a business here because when I tell people I do quilt classes, they either think about grandmothers or they don't know what I'm talking about. Or they think it's the Scottish things, the kilts.
Oh, quilts and quilts. Okay.
So that's
That's
also why I stopped focusing on only using the word quilts, but I started explaining people making party flags, soft toys, and then it doesn't really matter it's quilting techniques because the people I want to like make believe in me, they don't know what quilting is. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I knew what quilting was before I got into it, but I didn't really realize here in Canada how popular it really is until I got into it, and then just opened up a whole new world. So
yeah,
hopefully your YouTube channel and what you're doing will open up a world too to other
I'm
people.
working on it.
That's well, let's talk a little bit about your work area. Do you have a dedicated area for working on things in your home?
Not in my home, but I have it somewhere like about an hour from my home, which is quite an interesting place because it's a waste recycling plant
Oh, okay.
where people bring their trash, and I am allowed to use one of the workspaces for 1.5 years to turn the textiles into new stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. That's yeah. And so it's basically a studio, a fair
Yeah,
bit right in where well, you're sourcing your materials right there.
yeah, because I want to make quilting more popular because it has a lot of potential to recycle clothes that cannot be recycled in the traditional ways.
Right.
So I have like 1.5 years to build the method and maybe also bring it to other places after that.
So you say you have 1.5 years. So does that mean you lease the space? Uh, like
It's
the
more like I get it sort of for free when I do things for the center back. And also developing the method is one of the things they want me to do.
oh, okay. Well, that's
It's like, yeah, it's one of the municipalities that really want to become like sustainable. So
right. Okay. Well, that's a very interesting model. I've not heard of that before.
yeah.
So definitely something a little different. So, do you have a favorite tool or technique, or like when you sit down to make like the quilt you just showed us, and I know you make it from scraps and that, but is there a certain methodology that you use, or is it completely improv? You just sit down and
Um,
start putting pieces of fabric together.
A bit of both. It usually starts with an idea or a drawing or something I want to say, or maybe an exhibition I, I am part of. With the soft toys, it also starts with something I want to express, and then there comes an animal that makes sense for it. Then I make a drawing, and then how I fill in the drawing is usually improvisation.
Oh, okay. So basically, you definitely come to quilting with a very artistic mentality, I would
Yeah.
say, with it, you
I
know.
started out more traditional. I'm also working on a Dear Jane, for example,
Okay.
but I like the expressive side more. And I also think that's more interesting for people who want to learn how to quilt.
Yes,
Because
true.
then it's not I'm not really I also tell people I can teach you to become super creative and make something beautiful out of fabrics, but I'm not like good at making it super neat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more okay. I'll use the word because I hate this word, but I'm going to use it. It's more organic.
Yeah.
That seems to be the word that everybody uses now for things that really don't follow.
Playful.
Playful. That's good. That's good.
I
Yeah.
do have a pattern, but it's not like strict. And when people do something else, I think it's good. I think it shows I'm a good teacher because people feel the freedom to do something else.
Yes, I definitely agree with that since I come from a teaching background. Made me very happy that, when I taught my students something, but I always encourage them to go beyond it, make it your own kind of a thing,
Yeah.
make it work for you uh,
Yeah.
with that. So if you had well, let's talk about your sewing machine.
Hmm.
Do you have one sewing machine? Do you have many sewing machines? What kind of sewing machine?
Um, I've like so far I've the normal ones, like a second-hand one, and also actually one a Benina that also got brought into the waste recycling center.
Ah, okay.
I don't know. Since I've become this sustainable champion, everything just appears.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe that's because before you weren't thinking on that line, so you didn't notice that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Now that you think on that line, yeah, you see all the possibilities
Yeah.
there. But that's an important thing too, like recycling sewing machines, because
Hmm.
we just recently, our neighbor had a sewing machine and we reconditioned it for her because she wasn't sure why it wasn't sewing. It just needed oil. And it was like a 50-year-old sewing machine, but the little sucker works,
It's perfect. Yeah.
like why buy new if it does what you want it to do, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
With it all, you don't need necessarily all the buzzers and bells, not at least when it comes to quilting. I mean, if it makes a
Well,
scrap.
there's some functions I'm really missing, but like I'm just starting out and it's also kind of a social business, so I just don't have the money yet.
Yeah, true. Yes, because they're expensive.
I'm also dreaming of a long arm machine, but those things are very expensive in the Netherlands, so that's a long-term dream.
They're very expensive here too. I know, I have one. And it costs a lot, but I love it.
Yeah.
And that brought me to my next question. And I think you've just answered it. If you had all the money in the world, what one piece of equipment would you buy? And I think you've just answered that.
Probably a long arm, but then I will have to research a long arm that can stand different kinds of fabrics
True.
because I am into organic sewing, but the quilting I do is usually very boring because I have a very basic machine, so it's not really possible to do more. But I sometimes have ideas to draw with the quilting and stuff like that. So a long arm, I think, would very well match with how I think.
Yep. Well, a long arm is an amazing thing. I love my
Yeah.
long. Still learning it. They're a big piece of equipment. Take up a lot of space and they take a lot of your money. A lot of your money.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
But it's not impossible if my business keeps growing slowly.
we'll
It's a
get there.
business expense. It's not impossible.
Yeah, you'll get there with it. So, now you mentioned that you belong to a modern quilting guild, because my next question is, have you ever belonged to a online or an in-person group? So,
Hmm.
can you tell me a little bit about this modern quilting guild? Like you said, there's like 10,000 members. So,
Well, yeah, you have I think in America and Canada you probably have it too. It's like the National Quilt Guild,
yes. Yep.
and they have smaller groups. Like members of it formed smaller groups,
Right.
and my modern quilt group is one of those smaller groups. We
Right.
call it the Mockingbird, and we're modern quilters. So we're about 15 now, I think, and it's very fun. It's nice because then it's just lovely because then you have people you see every month or so, and also you inspire each other. It's very nice.
Yeah. So do you meet in person or do you meet
Yeah,
virtually? So you do meet in person.
yeah.
Yeah. From it. Yeah. Guilds are very popular here in North America as well. And the same thing. I belong to the Canadian Quilters Association, which is a national organization
Hmm.
with yeah, it's like 10,000 or more like members. I'm not sure how many, but then there's the subgroups as well. And some of them do meet in person. A lot of them have gone to the Zoom uh,
Yeah.
meeting now, and that's a leftover from COVID. And also here in North America, come the winter months, since Canada, it's more difficult depending on the weather conditions, you know, the snow and stuff like that, to
Hmm.
get to something in person. And let's face it, I'm not sure about where you live, but our guilds are primarily made up of like 99% of older ladies and they don't want to drive in the snow.
I'm still the youngest one. I remember like 4 years ago, I was at like an exhibition and somebody just screamed at me like, "You're the youngest member," and I was like,
Yeah, I know. And that's why when we were talking earlier and you're saying about making it more accessible to more people and that kind of thing. I really wish younger people would get into it a little bit more. And I don't
"Yeah."
know how you attract younger people to it because
Well, it's difficult to like pick them from the street, but now I'm following the strategy of working together with organizations,
hmm,
like the workplace I have now. It also has like a deal with an organization that makes lessons for schools. So
okay.
actually, yesterday I taught like 29-year-olds how to make party flags. It was intense
Yeah,
but
yeah,
fun.
yes. I
And I'm
can,
going to do more of those things. So not necessarily quilting in the way of teaching them how to make a blanket, but maybe upcycling clothes. And then if people are interested, you can work your way towards like quilting.
yeah.
But you have to, I think, really be honest with your and realistic about how you approach it, because not all young people will necessarily want to make a whole blanket, but maybe some of them are willing to like learn the basics.
Yeah, so start small, and then if they get
Yeah.
the fever, they'll just naturally progress to maybe other projects that are a little bit more challenging. But
Quilting is not for everyone, like, and that's okay. I
yeah,
just want people to know its value, and if they do it or not, yeah, like maybe 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 will really be touched. But if the other 10 know for the rest of their lives that quilting is relevant, I'm also happy.
yeah, yeah, that's very true. So, what's it like getting supplies? Now, of course, you're getting them from recycled and things that people are casting off and that,
Yeah.
but how is it for if someone gets into quilting, maybe not so much into the sustainability about it, but just in general, getting supplies like your sewing equipment, your notions, your fabrics? Is that an easy thing to get? Like, do you have a lot of quilt stores in
Yeah, quite a lot.
you do? Okay,
They're
that
not like in places with easy public transport usually, but there are
okay,
quite a lot of quilt shops because quilting in the Netherlands is quite big and people who do it tend to do it a lot. Like one of my friends even has a quilt shop. And you also have general sewing shops where you could buy like your thread and your scissors and stuff
right.
like that. And you
Yep.
have the online, of course, secondhand stores. I score a lot of quilting books in secondhand stores.
Okay, that's interesting because when I get back to Holland someday, I'll be definitely looking for quilt stores and that. So it's nice to know there's lots to choose from. But you know, I've heard from other people in Europe. There is one lady I know who lives in France, and she says it's very difficult to find
Mm.
quilting supplies in France. And if she wants anything, she usually has to order it from overseas, like North America, and it costs her a lot in shipping. So that's interesting that Holland has so many because I wasn't expecting that at
And
all,
they even have like different styles. Like my friend's shop has modern quilt fabrics, you have traditional ones, you have so
right?
many different. I think even in my hometown, but I don't come in quilt shops often.
Oh, well, if I was there, I'd be in every quilt store. I'd just be hopping from one to the other across it.
People do that actually.
Yep.
Yeah, people
Yeah, they
do
do it
that.
here
Yeah.
too. Yep, same thing. We call it a shop hop. So,
Yeah.
all right. So, do you have any favorite experts or sources of information you go to when you're, you know, if you want to learn a technique or get inspired?
Not necessarily techniques, because I tend to like to learn by doing.
Right.
But there are people I follow because they inspire me in how they do it online. Because I would really like to make a living out of creating the content I make.
Hmm.
But I do want to do it ethically. I don't want to become annoying or lose myself or lose the sense of intimacy people feel with the content I make now.
Yeah.
So Heidi Parks is a very nice one, for example.
Yeah.
Also Zach Foster, because they're also more into the intuitive. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Hmm.
You have another one. I forgot her name. She's embroidery, Christina something.
Oh, okay. I'm not.
And I follow lots of sustainable creators because I like to see how they make
Right.
things.
Yeah. So let's talk about your business model. Let's talk first of all about your YouTube channel. Now, your YouTube channel is called Kick Ass Quilts. I
Yes.
love that name. How did you come up with that name?
Well, together with a coach, actually, I wanted to create, I wanted to make quilting more popular for young people, and I wanted to make it, to bring a different perspective, that it also could be lively and new and young and joyful. And then this made sense because I'm also a little bit of a quiet activist.
You're right. I would never have
So,
guessed that. And I'm saying that humorously.
yeah. But I used to be much more shy. Like, it's funny. Sometimes I tell people, yeah, I'm a very shy person. And then they start laughing. And then you realize how far you've come as a person.
Exactly, exactly. So how long have you had the YouTube channel?
I think the YouTube channel, like 2 years, but actively, I think I've became more active in the last half year
Right.
because I had to go through a lot of uncertainty about filming and content and would anybody even want to see it. And I had a lot of mental health struggles. So the last half year, I've really taken it more seriously.
And I have been following your YouTube channel now for a bit and trying to catch up on your catalog of videos and that. And I find them very, very interesting, very inspiring as well. And
Mhm.
I just, as I said earlier, I love the whole bend you take towards sustainability and the idea of the therapeutic what do you call it, the therapeutic benefits of
Yeah.
quilting and going beyond. And that was one reason why I want to interview you as well when I discovered that. So what, I know you have a website as well. So what are your plans, your plans for all of this in the development of your YouTube channel? I'm hearing
Yeah.
that you want to, of course, make this more of a business for yourself as
Mhm.
well. So, do you have some immediate goals or long-term goals for?
Um, the dream and the end goal is to have a platform where people can access the classes I have, either individually or maybe for groups.
Right.
Like if you are a community center or if you are like a group of people who wants to do something, that you can like get my method and make party flags or make a community quilt, or people who want to learn quilt sustainably, that they can either get classes on how to use specific materials or like how to make specific projects. So I wanted to be like a place where people can learn everything
Right.
in a way that it's not overwhelming. So it's
Yeah.
will be easily to navigate everywhere in a very accessible way. So I won't talk about perfection. I will talk about this is how you can get it done. And if you want to become perfect, just practice.
Yeah. I think that's a really great philosophy as well.
Yeah.
So, well, I hope that your business model and your plans for that all turn out because it's definitely a little different bend than I have seen
Yeah.
previously, and I hope it doesn't burn you out because sometimes
No.
when we change turn something creative into a business, then it can destroy what your original feelings were. But I have a feeling the way your philosophy works that that's not going to happen to you. uh,
Well, it's I think it also becomes I had those moments too, of course, but I think in that it's really important to stay true to yourself. Because when I just started out with my business, I fell in with all those mega marketing people and stuff like that. And then I felt a lot of pressure that I had to achieve lots of goals, but that didn't work out. And now I don't even have a proper website. If people are interested in these offerings, they should subscribe to the newsletter, and I will let them know when the website is done.
Okay, that's good. I will
So
I will put in the show notes for this when this
yeah,
goes up. I will put the link to your YouTube channel. I will put the links to your website as well on there. And that's good advice. So if people really want to keep it up to date on your developments and things, they should subscribe to your newsletters, what you're
yeah, because like this is for me, and I think that's also an interesting process. It's very personal process, but that's why it also maybe becomes valuable for others. It's a way of finding who you are and how you want to do things in life. So that's why I'm doing it slowly, and I think then the danger of burning out is less, because then you're not really trying to sell something you're not. Then you're just doing it based on your own values. And I
right.
really like sharing what I make with others. When I make like a beautiful quilt, I'm like, other people would probably want to see this too.
Yep, yep. And there's lots of people out there that love to. I'm off to a quilt show in Eastern Canada tomorrow, actually, and
Mhm.
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the quilts at this
Yeah.
show. It's a
And
national.
if I, for example, make a quilt that gives me a sense of safety in my home, then I'm like, other people might also want to feel that. So,
Yep, it's a sharing thing, and again, the
yeah.
sense of community you've already talked about. So you've actually given a lot of advice already. And my last question is, do you have any advice for anyone who wants to get started in this art form? And I call it an art form
Mhm.
because it is an art form. It's not sewing per se.
No.
It's an art form. So do you have any kind of other
Um,
advice? You've given us a lot.
well, start small.
Okay, that's good.
I have a beginning class. It's called A Taste of Quilting, where you learn how to make like a coaster-sized memory quilt with your old clothes.
Ah,
If people email me, they can get access to it.
okay.
I've been feeling very generous lately because I have no website. I'm like, I'm just going to give people the beginner class if they want to, and then I'm reaching people. Just start with something small is the conclusion.
Yeah, that's a good. That's good.
And don't get discouraged by going to quilt shops and discovering how expensive it is and how difficult it is, because I had people who came to me and said, we've been to a quilt shop and now I don't want to quilt anymore.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Start small and start with something you like.
Yeah, and I think what you've already told us about sustainability, about getting your fabrics that you get for virtually free, even out
Nothing.
of your own house. You probably got old clothes that are just sitting there in the back of a closet that you could turn into something beautiful.
And one more important tip is you don't have to start with a sewing machine.
Oh,
People seem to have the idea that you can only make a quilt when you have a sewing machine, but you don't have to. You can just start with a scissor and the needles and pins and make something small. It doesn't have to be quick as well. There's no reason why you should finish a quilt in a week.
yeah,
Like, you can, of course, if you want to, but you can just start with something small by hand. And if you like it, you can go from there.
there. Yeah, that's probably very good advice because I think a lot of people think you need to invest a lot of money to get started.
Yeah.
And that's very discouraging, as you've said, because you go and you start pricing stuff and you go, whoa, this is not a cheap hobby. But
No,
it can be as
it
expensive
can
as
be.
you want it.
It
It
can be
can
very
be.
cheap.
Oh yeah, but yeah, you can start off very basically. For me, hand sewing's not an option because it would just be a whole lot of blood. Uh, I'm not good with that. But the philosophy behind that, I definitely get that. Well, do you
People also tend to be afraid of the sewing machine. So I usually tell people I don't start my live classes with a sewing machine.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's technology, and technology can be intimidating to some people
Yeah.
as well. I embrace it because I love it, but not everybody does.
The
So,
people who love it will do it anyway. So I tend to
yeah, true.
focus my classes on like people who are not having the courage to go for it.
Yeah, which I think is a great approach. So before we end here, do you have any final parting words, anything else that you'd like us to know about you, your aspirations, your goals, anything like that we haven't touched on?
Maybe I'd like to encourage people to try to make something because with old clothes, because then you will notice how much fun it is. Like you probably have some old clothes laying around that you don't really want to throw out, but you also don't really know what to do with. I will encourage you to try and make something fun out of it and tell me how you liked it. Because I
Yeah.
also always like getting pictures from people.
Okay. So
And
that's
if you want me to help you or help your quilt guild, I'm also available for online
okay.
bookings or Zoom or
And I will put all your contact
yeah.
information to the show notes for this as well, so people can reach out if they so desire. So I want to thank you so much for doing this interview. I
Hmm.
have found this very inspiring from a point of view that I didn't think of at the very beginning, but this whole idea of the sustainability is really kind of making me reassess how I approach my quilting as well in a very positive way. So thank you for that. And I wish you all the luck in the world getting your business up and going. And I encourage people to check you out because they too are going to be inspired, I am sure. So
Thank
thank you,
you so
Rianne.
much.
Just stay on the line here and thank you again.